Welcome to day 3 of 100 Days of Sewing. My name is Catherine Wilson of Queenie Quilts, and we're here in my studio, back from yesterday's drama. So yesterday, we had all of these blocks, these little tiny pineapple crazy blocks to depaper and do some assembly on, and I got that done. So I did find all the blocks. There are actually 77 of them complete. So I have on the back behind me 3 rows of 5 quad blocks, basically. So that's 60 of these babies that are on the wall in the 5x3 configuration. I have a few down here at the bottom that I made. So I got them sewn together, but they kind of don't fit the square, so I just set them aside for the moment. And then I got to the point that I felt like they were starting to be too much alike. So I do have a half a dozen or so. I don't know how many, 7, 8, something like that, that will go back in the box. I'm going to take these off the wall tonight and then start on something new tomorrow. But I wanted to talk about scrap management, come back to kind of where we were yesterday. So I'm going to walk through kind of what ends up in my scraps and what I do with them, how I'm going to deal with them, and sort them. And then I'm going to do a shot and do the fast movement, you know, whatever. So you can kind of see what I do. I'm not always 100% consistent in terms of what I do. So you're going to see that some things show up here, and in one case I put them in one pile, and in another case I put them in a different pile. If I feel like that fabric in particular or that color in particular is overloaded in a specific pile, I may, you know, even if it's 2.5, I may put it into another pile because I have a ton of red 2.5-inch strips or whatever that happens to be at the moment. So I'm gonna get started. I've pulled kind of some samples of what shows up in my scrap pile, so we can kind of talk through what I would do with them, and I'll make piles and then I'll go and process them a little bit later. So let's get started. So this piece was obvious. It has batting attached to it, so this was obviously a backing to a quilt. So this is the little 4 inches that's left over on the outside when you turn it over to the long armor, and it came back. It just needs to have this little piece trimmed off. It's not quite 6.5, so it will and I've already got tons of this in my 2.5, so I will put this in my little tiny scraps pile. I'm gonna put those over here. I have a number of, it looks like, I don't know, they're 3 inches. But they've got like sewing on the back, but they're not attached to anything. So I think, and it looks like it's kind of all weird. So likely I sewed on it and had to pick the stitches. There was something wrong with the tension. And so I'll just put these in my 3-inch pile for triangles, half square triangles. I have a strip. These are 2.5 inches wide. So this will finish at 4.5, eventually a square made of it. So left over from a quilt. I think this was a sample from last summer. I think, not 100% sure. I have used this fabric, this pink fabric, in tons of stuff. It's one of my favorite fabrics from Hoffman. So this one is like a subs section. I've got a number of them, so I'm just going to set them aside, and what I'll do is I will cut these a little bit later into whatever size they need to be. So in this case, these are 2.5-inch strips sewn together, so I will subcut them at 2.5-inch segments and then put them in my destined to be a 4-patch pile. So I'll put those over here. I have a number of layers of a single fabric. So this is, you're going to see this in Harvard Lighthouse. This is one of the inner pieces, one of the big long spikes. And so you end up with, I think, 8 layers of the same fabric that you cut from I want to say it's a 10.5-inch strip, but I'm not 100% sure. So I have a lot of it. And this will overwhelm, and if I were to put this in the little scrap bin, it will overwhelm that scrap bin. There'll just be too much of it. It'll take too long to use up. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subcut from the middle here a couple of 2-inch strips, as many as I can get, and then subcut them into 2.5-inch squares. They won't make sense to put in the 2.5-inch strip pile because they're not really long enough. The 2.5 inch strip pile, I usually reserve for 14 inches and greater of those 2.5 inch strips. So I will subcut this one, so I'll put that into a subcut pile. Again, I have another one of those little leftover pieces, so that'll go in that pile. I have a single, so I don't know, it's left over from something, so I'll put that in a pile. A friend of it's, so it looks like maybe all I have is middles. So maybe I had too many of middles. It was a 9 patch and I have too many of the middles. So I'll just throw those in my destined to be a 9 patch pile. Another one that's destined to be a 4 patch. I have square triangle, so that will be enough. I'll put that in a finished units pile. I don't know, maybe it was a border, I'm not sure. So again, in that subcut pile. This is just gonna go in the light side of the mini scraps. Again, just a little scrap, a couple more of those, different types. So then I have 8, yeah, there's 8 layers here, so 8 triangles. These are gonna go in just to the mini on the dark side. So over here, I've got that pile we talked about yesterday. So this is that other box I was talking about. It's separated to dark and light right now. It's just a piece of cardboard that's cut just to separate them. And then I leave this right by my sewing table, and I work out of it onto these blocks behind me. So as I said yesterday, I have a couple of these. I like to keep a little box of whatever leader and ender project or little paper piece, scrappy project I'm working on right by my desk that when I finish piecing something, I don't want to cut that thread. I don't want to leave nothing under the needle. So I'll throw one of these little units in, and then they kind of gather themselves back up over time, and eventually you kind of make a quilt in the meantime until you're ready to do assembly. So that's just right here. Again, these are 8 layers from Antique Lighthouse. This is the border print. Again, this is much like this one. There's kind of too much there. There's 8 layers. And while that seems like a lot, that would make probably 150 small pieces. So I'll cut a 2.5 inch strip, subcut it into 2.5 inch squares and put them in the 2.5 inch square pile. Couple of little strips. They're just gonna go in the dark smallies pile. This one is kind of half, not quite. It's a little more than where the fold is, so the fold would be right here in the fabric. It's not quite 5 inches, so it's gonna get into the 2.5 inch, to be cut into 2.5 inch strip pile. Again, this one is a full length of fabric, but it's quite small. So I'm gonna put that in the 2.5 inch, to be cut into 2.5 inch square piles. Same with this one. Pull those strings off into the 2.5 inch square pile, or into the 2.5 inch strip pile. These are just one, well, there's 8 layers here, but one layer is just this odd shape. So again, this is gonna go into the 2.5 inch square pile because it doesn't really make sense in the strip pile. And it is, actually, I think I'll put half of them into it is 6.5 inches, more than 6.5 inches wide. So I'm going to put that half of it into the 6.5 inch squares pile over here, and half into the to be cut into 2.5 inch strips pile. And then this one's pretty small, so I'm just going to take this one and put it as it is into the itty bitties pile. This is how big? 2.5. Okay, so it looks like this is maybe a piece of binding. Maybe that was cut, but it's got just a little bit off of the strip. So I'm going to put this in the 2.5 inch strip pile because it's more than half of a width of fabric. Again, some more of these little like pre-blocks. I don't know what you call these, little partial, wanna be a block, I want a teenage block maybe, I don't know. So we'll put that in that finishing pile. Just some odds and ends. This one's from one of the wedding rings. This is a pretty significant amount of 2.5 inch strips. of a background, which I don't have a lot of these, so I'm going to put these in the 2.5 inch strip pile. These are a couple of 1.5. Yeah, they're 1.5 inch strips. There's a couple of them. I'm gonna put these, where do I want to put it? It's a lot, quite a bit of fabric. From a scrap perspective, it's quite a bit of fabric. So I think I'm going to put half of them in with the baby pieces, and then a section of them in those I want to grow up and be a 9 patch, because I think you could finish off those 9 patches with these. So I'll put those over there. Some little triangles. These are cut off triangles from some snowball corners from a quilt. So I'm going to throw those in the dark side of the true scraps. These are a bunch of triangles. They are all the same fabric. So there's probably 15 or 16 of them. I am just going to put them there in odd shape, and there's not really enough to cut a 2.5 inch square out of. So I'm going to throw them into the oddities pile, as I call it. And then I've just got these weird angled pieces. I'm going to put those in the dark side. Again, some little tiny cast off. These are actually a binding cast off triangle. So when I cut the binding, well, when I made the binding on the diagonal, these are the little pieces you cut off. So these are going to go on the light side of the oddities pile. So again, a few more. And then this one is kind of a 1 inch to 1.5 inch strip. It looks like it wasn't cut straight. So it was either the edge of the fabric or something like that. So I'm just going to throw that into that oddities pile. This is 2.5 inch. These are from a jelly roll strip. And there's a couple pieces that are 2.5 inches. So I'm going to throw those in the to be cut down to 2.5 inch squares pile. So that's going to go there. And then I have this kind of very odd shaped. Now this one I'm going to cut. I find the biggest edge, the longest edge. In this case, it's actually here, because these you lose too much when you square them off. So I'm going to cut 2 or 3 strips, 2.5 inch strips this way. Put those, subcut them into 2.5 inch squares, and then put what's left over, these triangle bits, the side bits, over into the oddities pile. So I'm going to go get started. Those are kind of the types of things that end up. As you can see at this point, from an oddities perspective, I do not sort by color. I do sort by color for my 2.5 inch strips, my 6.5 inch strips. They end up in color packets or color piles. But for oddities, I do not, other than to separate them from light and dark. So I know which side of this guy they go on, or any of those little crumb quilts that use just little bitty tiny pieces. So I don't sort them by color, just they're either a dark or a light. And those medium fabrics go in the dark pile. And if I need to pull them out because I need mediums, then I'll pull them out as I go, but I don't really technically separate them. All right, so I am going to move the camera so you can actually see me do some work here, and I'll catch you at the end. And just like that, we're all finished prepping all of these. So I'm gonna keep going because, well, there's a whole lot more, like half a tub still. I am gonna though take a quick 5-minute break and put these all away where they belong. And then we'll come back tomorrow and make something out of them. I have an idea, so yeah, we'll hit that tomorrow. All right, so thank you for visiting us on day 3, and we'll see you tomorrow for day 4.